bear with me. So, for example, if I say najasa is only established via certainty, yeah. So this is my rule. Najasa is established only through yaqeen, through certainty. Now, I want you to understand this. Najasa, yeah, so impurity, ritual impurity. I don't have time to now go into the details of the ruling, but in any case, so if najasa is only established through yaqeen, ritual impurity is only established through certainty. This is our ruling, our general ruling in fiqh. Now I want to explain this to my students. I give them an example. So this is one meaning of the word example. So I say, for example, if I go to the bus and I see a lady come with her dog from the rain, and the dog sits on the bench. Sits on that bench there. Yeah? That bench has become now what? Najis. It has become ritually impure. I cannot go and sit on that. Or if I do, my clothes will become najis. Well, then I cannot pray in those clothes. Yeah? So, now I'm giving you an example of that. Of course, this is yaqeen. Now, certainty has been said. But now someone will say, okay, if I go on the bus now, certainly, and my clothes are wet, certainly at some point during the 10-year history that this bus has been serviced, every seat has had a dog come after rain and sit on it. So for certainly, all of these seats must be in fact najis, or someone who's drank alcohol has spilled some on it, or etc., etc. So do I now assume all the seats on the bus are najis? No, because our ruling was what? Najasa is only established through yaqeen. So even if I have the 1% chance that, maybe the seat was never had dogs sit on it, or etc., it never became it, then it's not established. Or the famous example when Khomeini rahmatullah went to Paris and he rented a house, and then he wanted to dry his socks on the radiator. They were wet socks, he had washed them. And mashallah, even at that status that he had, he still washed his own clothes. So he washed his own socks and he put them to dry on the radiator like this. And then someone told him, that Sayyidina, this is radiator. This house has had atheists living, and they were living in France. They're all atheists here. They've been living here. They probably dried their clothes here, so this must be najis. So why do you put it there? And he said, have you seen Have you seen an atheist? Have you seen a kafir come and put his socks here? I said, no. So then, of course, what are you talking about? So the najasa is only established to certain. So this is one meaning of example. Well, we give an example to elucidate something. Yeah? Other meaning of example is tashbih. So to say that something is like something else. Other meaning of method, sorry. Example in English is a bit more limited. But another meaning of method is tashbih, to say something is like something else. So for example, in this surah we have on verse 15, which we read today, مَثَلُ الْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي وُعِدَ الْمُتَّقُونَ فِيهَا أَنْهَارٌ مِّن مَاءٍ غَيْرِ آسِنٍ وَأَنْهَارٌ مِّن لَبَنٍ لَمْ يَتَغَيَّرْ طَعْمُهُ وَأَنْهَارٌ مِّنْ عَسَلٍ مُصَفًّى, etc., etc. Yeah. So Allah says, مَثَلُ الْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي وُعِدَ الْمُتَّقُونَ. The example of the garden that is promised to the believers is what? That it has rivers of pure water, and it has rivers of milk, and it has rivers of honey, and it has rivers of wine that does not intoxicate, etc. So does this mean that literally when we go to heaven there will be rivers of honey, for example, or rivers of milk? No, Allah says, مَثَلُ الْجَنَّةِ. This is an example, meaning that it is in such abundance that it's a river. It's a river of this thing. So, of course, not literally a river is meant here, so it's tashbih, an example. What's the method here meant? كَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ أَمْثَالَهُم. It's not tashbih. Of course, what Allah is meaning is, of course, that there are those exemplars, those people who have followed this haqq, who are there for us, who are elucidating to us what haqq means. They're there and visible for us. Yeah?
Any question? Yeah.
Had a question?
Yeah. Our friends were discussing something about atheists. If an atheist invites you in his home and we don't see him cooking the food, but we still know that he is an atheist and he is najis, and can we eat that food? It is kind of rather.
Yeah, of course, then you do have yaqeen, because who else would have cooked it? Yeah. It's a different case.
Atheist means kafir, yeah? Kafir.
For the ruling. Of course, not all of the scholars believe in the najasa of the kafir.
Yeah.
Some disagree with that. We have to check what your own madrasa says and follow that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, but like if somebody like atheist invites you, isn't it?
Or you
true
can say,
to
let's
be-
go out and eat, you know. You can
Okay.
counter the invitation with something else.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to bother you, let's go out together.
Yeah,
etc.,
okay.
And so on and so forth. Or maybe have some food. Oh, you're going to have the problem of what you can eat. You have to make vegetarian as well.
Yeah.
That issue as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, you have to use your cleverness in this sort of situation.
Okay.
We continue, inshallah. فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. When you meet the faithless in battle, فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ. Strike their necks. حَتَّى إِذَا أَثْخَنْتُمُوهُم. Until you have thoroughly decimated them. And the verse is quite long. We'll go bit by bit. But here, of course, the verse starts with what? فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. So therefore, when you meet the kuffar, here in English translation it's put in battle. It of course should be in parentheses because the verse itself just says فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ, when you meet the kuffar. Yeah? But of course the context of the verse is very clear that it means in battle. Why? Because, well, first of all it says strike their necks, which is for combat use, and furthermore حَتَّى إِذَا أَثْخَنْتُمُوهُم, until you have overcome them. We'll talk about what أَثْخَنْتُمُوهُم means. But overcoming as in winning the battle. فَشُدُّ الْوَثَاقِ. Then you should tie their necks. You should bind them, very firmly. فَإِمَّا مَنَّ بَعْدُ وَإِمَّا فِدَانٍ. Then either after that you can set these captives free or exchange them for some money or for some other prisoners of war. And then of course, so these are all context of battle, as in the description, taking prisoners of war and exchanging prisoners of war, etc. And of course until towards the end, very clearly, حَتَّى تَضَعَ الْحَرْبُ أَوْزَارَهَا, until, of course, the war is finished. We'll talk about what it means تَضَعَ الْحَرْبُ أَوْزَارَهَا. Of course, the war is finished. So very clearly, the context of these verses is what? Talking about combat, about a war situation, the situation of a battlefield. So, of course, some Islamophobes and some Takfiri extremists have tried to take this verse out of this context and use this sort of the itlaq of the beginning of the verse, the general nature of the beginning of the verse. فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Whenever you meet the kuffar, strike them next. So they try to justify, the Takfiris try to justify the terrorism by this verse and say, whenever you meet the kuffar, strike their necks, kill them. And of course Islamophobes say the same thing. They say, oh look, the Quran is saying whenever you meet the kuffar, you have to kill them. Of course, we know that you cannot read the Quran in this sense by taking things out of context. This is as Allah warns us in the Quran, what the الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ do. The people who have a perversion in their heart. This is how they read the Quran. They take things out of context. They do not read the Quran as a whole. And therefore, they end up with these very horrible understandings of the Quran to justify their own perverse desires. So that's not allowed, of course, in any situation or case. So the context is clearly of war. فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ. Then strike their necks. Of course, even in the past, so nowadays, of course, someone will say, well, what does this mean in battle? We have to always try to cut off the head of the enemy and use swords or something like that. Can we not use rockets or guns or things like that? No, of course, this is not meant to be taken literally in that sense. فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ. Even in the past, it didn't mean, the ruling was not that in the battlefield the Muslim soldiers had to always try to aim for the neck of the enemy and just try to cut off the head, that they couldn't use bows and arrows or spears or hit them in the leg or wherever in the torso.
Yeah.
No. So this is, of course, فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ here has a meaning contrary to its apparent meaning, which means to strike the necks, of course, to kill them in battle. But when you strike the neck of someone, it's a type of killing where the person is killed very quickly and painlessly. Yeah? So to cut off someone's head is to kill them very quickly and painlessly. So one idea here, of course, is that this sort of dirty warfare that nowadays is even more popular than in the past is not something that Allah permits or allows. So to use weapons or combat strategies that are aimed at just wounding the other person or causing maximum pain. This is not allowed. So chemical weapons, things like that, which are meant to disable a person for the rest of their lives. And of course the idea of chemical weapons is why that, or this sort of dirty warfare tactics, like, some armies, their philosophy is that aim for the, aim to wound the enemy soldier. Don't try to kill him. Because if you kill him, he's dead, it's over. If you wound him, there'll be two other soldiers who have to carry him back. Then he has to get all the care in the field. He has to have a doctor look at him, and then they have to take him all the way back to his home country. He has to get treatment there, etc. So the cost on the enemy state is much higher for a wounded soldier than it is for a dead soldier. Dead soldier, they just have to bury. That's it. But the wounded soldier, he's a huge burden on the society for many years to come. Chemical weapons, of course, is the ultimate form of this sort of dirty warfare. This person will then be disabled for the rest of their lives and will need intensive care, probably, for the rest of their life. So this is, of course, Allah says, no. If you're trying to kill them, if you're fighting them in the battlefield, if you're trying to kill the enemy, try to kill him, in a proper way, in a painless way, not to inflict maximum pain. And also, of course, broader than this, the meaning is that in war, as Muslims, we should be decisive when we're fighting the enemy. Yeah? Try to end the battle, end the war as quickly as possible. So when you say cut off the head of the enemy, cut off the head of the snake, the idea, of course, here is to hurt them in such a way that they don't come back for round two, that the war will end. Because, of course, war, when it prolongs, when it becomes a long affair, it will inevitably hurt the civilian population. It cannot be contained to just the people fighting on the battlefield. It's going to end up hurting everyone. The longer it takes on, famine and hunger and poverty and orphans and all these things, it will just grow and grow and grow. So Allah is saying that when you are forced to fight the enemy, then after that do not hesitate anymore. Yes, attempt for peace, attempt for diplomacy when you can. That is, of course, udkhulu fis silmi kaf. Allah says, Ya alladhina amanu udkhulu fis silmi kaf. Oh, you believe, come all of you to peace. Yes, try to invite people to peace wherever you can. But if you're forced to fight, then do not hesitate anymore. Then be brave on the battlefield and try to eliminate the enemy as quickly as possible, because that will mitigate the horrors of that war. It will mitigate the damage and destruction of that war. Yeah. Similar we have in Surah Al-Anfal, سَأُلْقِيَ فِي قُلُوبِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا الرُّعْبَ. I will make enter into the hearts of the kuffar fear. I will make fear enter into the hearts of the kuffar. فَضْرِبُوا فَوْقَ الْأَعْنَاقِ. Strike them above the necks. Again, not literally have to cut off their heads, but try to take out the head of the enemy, end the root causes of that conflict. وَضْرِبُوا مِنْهُمْ كُلَّ بَنَانٍ. And strike from them all their fingertips. Again, fingertips, striking out the fingers, it doesn't mean literally try to cut off the fingers of the enemy on the battlefield, but rather, when you say strike someone's fingertips, is to end their influences, or what we might say in English, the tentacles of the enemy. Cut off the tentacles of the enemy, so that they cannot spread that evil influence that they have, so that the fitna that they are spreading, those issues which caused the war to be started, cut off those. Do not let them carry on with this thing.
So this is propaganda.
It can have many different meanings, of course. It has to be contextualized to every situation. But the idea, of course, here is that when you're forced to the battle, be decisive and take it to the end. Don't stop halfway and say, okay, well, we did enough. No. Fight the war until you're certain that that enemy will not attack you tomorrow, and those problems which caused the war will not arise again tomorrow. Yeah? Because if you end it halfway through, then you'll see 1 or 2 years later, the same fitna will start, and in a decade later, you'll be in another war with that same enemy. So end it decisively, end the root causes, whatever those may be.
So
it could be that one of the ways would be to give charity to that enemy. Yeah? And that's one of the things we have in Islam, that one of the uses of zakat is mu'allafatu qulub, to bring people closer to Islam. It may be poverty is the cause. That other nation had poor people and they desired some of the goods that we had. Let's engage with them in trade and charity. Take out the root causes of that war. Whatever that may be, So of course it has to always be contextualized to the situation. But yeah, or if there's, like you said, propaganda is coming from that, fight them in such a way that you end all the sources of that propaganda, so that tomorrow they will not continue, etc.
So by fingers we can mean like some causes that.
Yeah, they're influences, the evil influences
Okay.
of the enemy. Yeah, to end those. Yeah, then he continues, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, حتى إذا أثخنتموهم. Let me see how much time we have. We'll try to do this verse until then. حتى إذا أثخنتموهم فشدوا الوثاق. أثخنتموهم. So until you have here thoroughly decimated them, bind the captives firmly. But of course, أثخنتموهم comes from ثقن, meaning harshness, but has the meaning of غلب أو قهر, to overcome, to destroy the enemy. So here this meaning of thoroughly decimating the enemy, to completely destroy the enemy, as we said, in a way that they cannot regroup and attack you again. So if we're, for example, thinking of this in the battlefield, if I see the enemy retreating, doesn't mean that I stop. Okay, I did enough. They're retreating. Let them go. No, because if you let them retreat, they will regroup and they will attack you again. That's what happens in a battle. The enemy unit will regroup. The commander will, if the commander died or the standard bearer died or whatever, they'll put a new standard bearer, new commander, and they'll attack you again.
Yeah.
So no, thoroughly decimate them. Not enough to drive them away, but to decimate them. So then Allah continues, فَشُدُّ الْوَثَاقِ. So chase them, take them as prisoners, tie them tightly, so they cannot attack you again. As we said, the whole philosophy of combat that is being given in this verse is that of ending the future threats. Yeah? So tie them tightly, the captives tightly, of course has the literal meaning. When he took the prisoner of war as a captive, don't just say, okay, stand there, and I'll come back for you later. I still have to go fight. No. Take his hands, tie him tightly to a tree or a rock or whatever, so he can't escape. And he can no longer threaten you or attack you from the rear or so on and so forth. But of course, that's a very sort of practical meaning, but the wider meaning, the metaphorical meaning here, of course, is, as we said, to disable the capacity of the enemy to regroup and attack you again. And of course, this also has a fiqhi ruling in this as well, that the taking of prisoners of war in Islamic law was not allowed until the battle had been decided. So you could not sort of call out, or we say in English, call dibs on an enemy prisoner before the battle was over. So, he's mine, prisoner, and then just leave the battlefield. I already got this important guy, I captured, for example, Abu Jahl or something, some famous leader of the Quraysh, and okay, that's it. I'm going to just guard him now because he's worth a lot of money. So as the next verse says, فَإِمَّا مَنًّا بَعْدُ وَإِمَّا فِدَاءً. So either you have to let them go after the battle, or you have to get ransom for them. So prisoners of war, especially the more important they were, from wealthier family they were, the more money you would get in exchange. It was a great loot. Imagine now if you went on a battlefield and you caught someone, they'd pay you 100,000 euros or 1,000,000 euros, in exchange for that prisoner. So you were, of course, going to guard it very closely, that treasure. So the ruling was that no, the prisoners of war you take once the battle has been decided. Don't start fighting over them before the battle has been decided. Then tie them tightly, and after that, of course, either let them go or exchange them for ransom. There is, of course, a third ruling here that is not mentioned in the verse here or in the Quran at all, but is mentioned in many, many hadith, and that is that you're also allowed to keep that prisoner of war as a slave. So if he doesn't have a rich family who can pay for his freedom, what do you do with that prisoner of war? You keep them as a slave. Now, of course, some scholars have said that perhaps one of the reasons why that ruling has not been mentioned in this verse, that it's only giving you a binary choice between letting them go or getting ransom, is because this was a ruling that was meant to eventually not be followed. So the idea that slavery was a ruling that was always meant to be temporary in Islam, and was something that was meant to be abolished sooner rather than later. And that's why it's not mentioned in the Quran. Of course, the whole philosophy of slavery in the Quran was because if the choice is binary, as we see here now, that either you have to let that prisoner of war go, or they have to pay ransom for it. And if there was no third option, because of course killing the prisoner of war is not allowed. You're not allowed to execute the prisoners of war. Why? Because that's, even nowadays, against international rules of warfare. But also because it's unjust. If someone has surrendered, then you have to respect that. But if it was a choice between letting them go and getting ransom, well, if the enemies, they say, okay, the Quran says if we surrender in battle, the Muslims have to either let us go, or they have to exchange us for ransom. Nobody pay ransom, they will have to let us all go, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then every time the enemy is about to lose the battle, they will say, we surrender, okay, capture them all. No one's going to pay ransom for them. Okay, let them all go. And tomorrow they will come and attack you again. Of course, this is not a logical way of fighting, as we said. This is giving the enemy, as we said, what they shouldn't have, the chance to always regroup and attack you again. So the idea was that there had to be another option, and there couldn't be, like today, big prisons. So we keep nowadays prisoner of war, maybe for a decade they might keep a prisoner of war. And that in itself is an injustice as well, but if you keep a prisoner of war for a year or two or so on and so forth, nowadays it's possible in a post-industrial society, but in a pre-industrial society, in an agricultural society, there was not enough food to go around to have just thousands of people sitting in big prisons and you have to feed them, and it was not possible. It was impractical. So, not just impractical, it was impossible to do. So they had to work as well. Everybody had to work. So you had to put these people to work. So slavery was the only option in that sense. So slavery in Islam was not the same as you might think in a colonial period, that they attack somewhere and they take a whole village, women, children, men, everyone, and they take them somewhere else. So this is not the idea of slavery. It was, as we said, primarily for prisoners of war. What do we do with these guys that have ended up as prisoners? Yeah. So that's sort of the philosophy of why slavery was allowed as well. And as we said, some scholars have said that this is the reason why as well. It's not mentioned in the Quran. Why? Because this was something that was only ever meant to be temporary. And nowadays in society, where it's possible to have the prisoners of war, to either keep them or then let them go after the war has ended, or exchange them for ransoms or other prisoners, then these are the options that we should follow, not sort of keeping them as slaves in our own society, which no one, of course, would want to do anymore. And of course, this is also very clearly the verse again shows that the actions of some takfiris like Daesh, who take prisoners of war and then cut their heads off, or drown them, or put them in cages and burn them, is completely against the rulings of the Quran. So the Quran is, of course, not allowing such treatment for prisoners of war. So even if they wanted to go back 1,000 years and say, okay, we take prisoners of war as slaves, that would be more justifiable than killing the prisoners of war. Of course, even slavery, as we said, all the scholars agree that it should have been abolished. We're running out of time, but actually, let's finish here, because if we continue, there's so much of the verse still left and we won't be able to finish it. We'll leave it the rest for next week. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
Can I ask if you don't need to explain so much? I know that you want to go.
No, I'm not in a hurry.
The first question is about, we know lots of scientists who are atheists these days. So where they are? In kafir? Because they are making fun of religion and so they are not Muslim, they are not Ahl Kitab, so they are kafir, yeah?
As I said, we can't know what a person is. We don't see inside of our heart. I could be a munafiq for all you know.
Yeah.
You don't see inside my heart. We cannot judge by the outward appearances of people. So we have to be very careful with labeling people in this way. What we can say is, theologically, Allah will punish the kuffar for their kufr and the evildoers for their evil actions. and that he will not be unjust towards anyone.
Yeah.
So this sort of worrying that, Stephen Hawking, he did great contributions to science, but he was a staunch atheist. Where is he going to be
exactly.
now? Is he going to go to hell? Is he going to go to heaven? Allahu alam. Allah knows where he's going to end up. It's not our worry. What we can say is the rule is that if you are an enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you deny the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you commit evil actions, you'll be punished for them.
Yeah, exactly. This is because when you listen to these guys, talking about religion, you think that this is not really, real religion. You just heard about, maybe Daesh and this and say that this is Islam. So,
they're intelligent enough people they should be able to differentiate between people of a religion, and that's a small percentage of them, and the religion itself. So we shouldn't judge Islam by the rank and file of the Muslims. So as we said here, the exemplars are those ones that an'am Allahu alayhim, that Allah has blessed them. They're the ones. So yes, judge Islam by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, please do. Judge Islam by Imam Ali alayhi salam. Please do. Judge Islam by these people. Don't judge them by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He is no representative of Islam. He is not of those who Allah has put as exemplars. So Allah says, كَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ أَمْثَالَهُم. There's the examples Allah has made for you. Look at those. Don't go looking at the wrong ones, because yes, that will of course lead you to an incorrect understanding of the religion. Look at the ones who lived by the teachings of the Quran. Those who followed the haqqum min rabbihim, the truth from Allah. But for us, I think many times people have this idea that, we have to know what's going to happen to this and this person. We can't know it. This is not a question that one should sort of exhaust oneself with. Rather, we can understand the theological rules, the general guidelines, the principles. The principles, as we said, for kufr we know. The principles of iman and amal salih we know. And these are what we should follow. We have to make the choice in our own lives. Am I going to follow kufr, or am I going to follow iman and the path of the mu'mineen? Whether Mr. X or Mrs. Y followed that, that's their sort of, they have to answer for that. What I can say outwardly, afterwards, I can outwardly judge. I can say, yes, outwardly he was a denier of the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Outwardly he sort of did not have faith. So outwardly it doesn't look good for him. Probably not going to be very easy for him. What's inside and what has it been like for him, and etc. Those only Allah will know.
Thank you.
But if somebody is following their thoughts, and we can stop them.
That's what I said. We have to make our own choice.
Yeah.
So I don't take Stephen Hawking as my exemplar of a moral man.
Yeah.
Because he's clearly, of course, apparently he's not following haqqum min rabbih. On the inside, we don't know. Allah alam, maybe he's doing taqiyya.
Yeah.
We know. But we don't know, so we don't take them as exemplars. I take as exemplars the people who have been placed as exemplars for me. Those are the ones I should follow. So then, yes, if I start, Stephen Hawking is dead. Forget him. Now a lot of people love what's his name, Elon Musk. They're big fans of Elon Musk. He's a great scientist or whatever, entrepreneur and innovator or whatever. Not a scientist. So, do I model my life after Elon Musk? If I do that, then I have to ask why. Is this an example of a person who is following al-haqqu min rabbihim? Or are there other reasons why I have chosen him as my exemplar? And is his words, now that I've chosen to idolize him, is he taking me astray from that path? So these are the questions we have to ask ourselves. Who do I take as exemplars? What path do I want to follow? Who do I idolize? I don't say we can't listen to other people, but to align ourselves with those people morally, religiously, ideologically, those are problematic.
Can we take him like, he would be my model of scientific for example, but not for my spiritual.
But that's a different issue. Scientists are always relying on the work of other scientists. Nobody is inventing everything from, from the wheel and fire and up. Everybody's relying on the work of previous people. So of course, you're modeling yourself after others in that sense. But to say, for example, Elon Musk, he's going to be my exemplar of how to run my business.
Yeah.
Even that is not good, because Allah has a lot to say about how we should conduct ourselves financially. And if I say, okay, I'm not going to do what Allah is telling me, I'm not going to live my life financially the way Prophet Muhammad lived or Imam Ali lived. Rather, I'm going to do it like him. So, I'll have a mansion and I'll try to become as rich as I can and become a billionaire and have yacht and these things. Then certainly we can say, well, this is not a life that has been modeled after the exemplars. The Prophet Imam Ali, they could have done all of that. They could have lived in mansions. They could have had thousands of servants. They could have had food brought to them from, farthest reaches of the world. Did they do that? No, they lived simply to the end of their lives. Imam Ali was still patching his own clothes when he was the Khalifa of the Muslimin. These are the exemplars we should take, even financially. Okay, even if Allah grants me success, it doesn't make me forget my path. It doesn't make me forget my akhirah. It doesn't make me forget sort of how to deal with my fellow man, and so on and so forth. So this is why the exemplars are important. Because it is easy to think that, okay, well, I'm giving my khubz, so what if I have all these other things? So then, of course, then that's where the exemplars come. If you truly want to strive on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to be those who are described in Surah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we said, the people of Iman, people of true Iman, then that's the choice we have to make, as we said. Which way do I go?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jazakallah.